You got it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Love and Lattes. Self-love scientist here, and I have a amazing and exciting guest to be with us today, rocking this amazing, sexy red blazer. We get to listen and hear from Eva Melchiorre, who is the founder of the Line Method in a studio in Adams Morgan. Eva is redefining the concept of fitness with her holistic approach to wellness and exercise. Rejecting the traditional no pain, no gain philosophy, Eva launched the Line Method in 2019, starting as a solo operation in her very own home studio. Over the past 5 years, she has expanded the business to include a team of dedicated fitness instructors who have embraced her method and values. Determined to help others after learning from her own diagnosis of hypermobility spectrum disorder, Eva has become and continues to lead as a fitness specialist in hypermobility related movement disorders. Eva, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be here.
And again, anyone who's listening, if you can hop through YouTube and just check out the blazer she's wearing, because it is.
Thanks. That's my power color. What can I say?
It very much is. That is her color, guys. Well, Eva, I'm so excited to have you on here. I think I've been following you for a long time, and I love, like, as you've stepped into this role of such, like, even with what you're wearing, like, I've never seen a woman take something more passionate and turn it into something more revolutionary for the world. And I know it's going to be changing things. And for anyone who's kind of new and was like, what did she just say? Can you give us a little bit of what the hypermobility spectrum disorder is?
Yeah, for sure. So, hypermobility spectrum disorder is a genetics kind of pseudo-neurological condition, which in essence, it just means that my joints are very, very mobile. And this goes beyond the realm of just like being super flexible. Because flexibility has a lot to do with like your musculature. You know, your muscles might be very flexible, and that can be really great and helpful with life. When your joints, like your wrists, your elbows, your shoulders, are actually too mobile, it can create a lot of instability. It can create a lot of pain and fatigue. There's a lot of research coming out now that, incorporates a much broader kind of spectrum of symptoms. And so that was something I didn't receive that diagnosis until late 2021. So I was 25 years old at the time. So the diagnosis came fairly, not late into my life, but just I was, a fully formed adult by that point, and had been dealing with just very inexplicable movement dysfunction throughout the course of my life. I remember being 7, 8 years old with like low back pain and knee pain. And, when you're that young, you don't really have much of a conception of what's going on. And so, as my journey kind of with my own health progressed and my journey deeper into the kind of movement and fitness sphere, I wanted to make sure that I was creating a space that could be fitness for people who, maybe didn't fit right into the mold of traditional fitness. So a lot of people with hypermobility spectrum disorder, but really the Line Method is created for anyone who maybe experiences pain or discomfort or fatigue and just needs a more personalized approach to their wellness and to their bodies.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that piece of your history with us.
Thank you.
So the Line Method was based on like this concept of no pain, no gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, like, is that something that you noticed like along your journey was like experiencing pain with movement?
Oh, goodness, yes. And I think one of the phrases that has come to mind for me recently is just feeling like the Line Method is really like my rebellion against where the fitness industry has gone, really in the last 10 to 15 years, which were my formative years in fitness. I was a teenager. I was very into the dance world. And so when I was growing up, it was just at the advent of things like CrossFit, like Orange Theory, which, don't get me wrong, are certainly brands that serve a great purpose for some people. However, we were just getting into this kind of we were just kind of getting into this realm of the fitness industry of very what they called HIIT workouts, high intensity interval workouts. And everyone was just doing HIIT all the time because it always kicked your ass. It always made you sweat. It always made you feel exhausted after the fact. But that was also the only thing that people were really doing in the fitness industry. There was very little emphasis on recovery. There was very little emphasis on any alternative forms of movement. And so I personally found that very, very challenging, especially because I was already dealing with musculoskeletal pain. I was already dealing with different issues. And so just going into these very high intensity, high impact workouts was not helpful for me. And that was really the crux of where the line method came from. And the line method inherently just is an approach to movement that we try to bring greater alignment into someone's body, their mind, their emotions. So it's very much not just we focus on the physical, but it's a very holistic and kind of all-encompassing approach that really stemmed from my own experience being so frustrated with everyone just telling me, oh, you need to go get stronger and you're going to get fine. And coupling that with this whole no pain, no gain sort of mentality, which realistically, it stems all the way back from the 80s with bodybuilding, and just the recognition that I got super strong at one point. I was powerlifting, I was bodybuilding, I was lifting super heavy weights, and I felt terrible. And so it was around that time that I really had to start thinking, all right, maybe there's a little bit more to this whole fitness thing than just lift heavy and do high impact workouts.
Yeah. I love the way you bring in the concept of balancing out your emotional and mental health as well. And I think, like, especially for women, I'd love to hear your input on this. Like, for women in general who are struggling with like a little bit of body confidence, and they're like, well, if I go to the gym, I'm going to, quote, lose weight, trim down, slim down. And they could be doing all the workouts, like all the, bodybuilding, and still not see the results. And I found that recently it could be because of like certain diagnoses, like whether it is, you have hypermobility and you end up doing more damage, or there are women out there who have PCOS and it's hard for them to create this balance with this, hormone dysfunction.
Yeah.
That's something that is pretty common in the fitness industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, and it just like, my heart goes out. I mean, this is something I'm just so passionate about because your body is so much more than just fat and muscle. It is. I mean, it's so complicated and beautiful, and it's full of emotion and hormones and bones and other tissues that aren't fat or muscle. And I just think that up until this point, people have gotten so ingrained in equating fitness to this really quantitative, like, oh, I'm only as valuable as my number on the scale, or I'm only as valuable as the inches that I am. And it just breaks my heart to hear that. And it's really, and I, to be honest, I'm not immune to it. I mean, that was growing up a dancer. There was a lot of that in my circles and just my experience growing up. And I feel very grateful that along this journey of incorporating that kind of mental and emotional aspect into the fitness space and my fitness and wellness experience, and how we incorporate it into the line method has really, I mean, not to sound too culty here, but it really has enlightened my thinking in terms of how I think about myself and it's given me the ability to give my body so much more grace than I ever did in the past. And that's really what I want to bring to other people, women particularly, because I think you're right. This is just it's a very ingrained way of thinking that goes, much, much further than just the fitness industry. But But I think that, and and men are in any sort of exception to this as well, but just this idea that your only value and the only reason that you should be working out is so that you can achieve some sort of like number, to me is just, it's not what fitness is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about, you know, learning more about your body, learning to treat your body well, what that means for you, because that's going to mean something a little bit different for everyone. My experience in a workout, my experience for self-care and for the different techniques that I use to take care of myself are going to look so different than yours. You're going to need something completely different that your body and your psyche is going to respond really well to. And I just think that that's been such a huge driver for me in developing this methodology and developing this studio is really just wanting to give people a space that you feel value as an entire person, and you are looked at as this entire being that is just so much more than a number on a scale.
I love this. You're like, you are more than just the number on the scale, the pant size, the clothes size, which I think can be completely like, I want to say disrupted by like social media or these unrealistic standards in like the beauty and fitness industry. And it sounds like what's really important is learning, like with your method, it sounds like you do a lot of like learning to listen to your body and then creating a connection with the mind. Is that right?
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I think that's probably one of that mind-body connection is one of our biggest emphasis, like our biggest points of emphasis in studio is I just think a lot of people kind of walk around and really have no real perception of what's happening in their body. I mean, we live in such a fast-paced world and we're all focused on work and we're all just, there's so much kind of distraction and noise. And I'm not immune to it. I definitely I have personally been making a very conscious effort to stop doom scrolling, because I'm finding that even I myself, I'm getting just sucked into this scrolling and then 25 minutes has gone by and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? And it really just pulls you. We have so much available to us that just pulls us out of our bodies in a way that I'm just not really sure has ever existed in the past. And so what we try and do is help pull people back into their bodies and really find a comfortable and really safe place to just be vulnerable and go on that journey and know that you've got someone there to support you. And some days that might look like exploring different movement, especially we started this conversation just with the hypermobility piece specifically. But that's a community of people who often experience a lot of pain with movement. And up until this point, there hasn't really been much in the way of resources for mitigating that. And so there's this fear around it, there's this fear around not just fitness and exercise, but movement in general. And so giving people, and that inherently is, a mental component. And so being able to provide people with a space where they can be confident that they're safe, that they're not going to be pushed, past a point of no return. They're not going to be pushed because of this no gain, no pain, no gain mentality. They're going to be supported, and there's a time to challenge your body, but it's not all the time. There are also times to just step back into your body and give yourself some space to figure out what is actually going on and then just take it from there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It sounds to me like what's really important and kind of like a take home is the fact that being intentional and taking the time to truly listen to what your body needs, regardless of kind of the outside noise we're being fed.
Yeah.
Something that we recommend to a lot of folks.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's definitely, I think it's just the willingness to be curious and the willingness to experiment a little bit. And I think there's a lot of, again, kind of a lot of fear around that because there is just so much information now that it's kind of hard to figure out, all right, what's right, what's wrong, what am I actually supposed to be doing here? Should I be dieting? Should I go on keto? Should I be lifting heavy weights? There's so much information. And so I think ultimately, kind of to your point, yeah, it's just this willingness to be curious and really listening into your body and how your body is responding to whatever thing or stimulus you're trying, whether it's a heavy lifting workout, whether it's a new form of meditation, whether it's a new nutrition program. Fitness does not just stop in the exercise space, but trying to learn what your body's signals are genuinely. And it's not a short-term practice. We talk a lot about longevity and just the recognition that, your body is going to change throughout the entire course of your life. It's going to react to things differently depending on what you've got going on. Full disclosure, I've been in a very stressful season in my professional life right now, and it's been taken a lot of mental energy from me. It's taken a lot of physical energy from me, and my workouts have looked very soft recently. And like mentally, I still have this desire to be like, oh, I feel like I should go harder or push myself because am I actually accomplishing anything right now? But the fact of the matter is, I actually physically feel really good these days. And I think it's because I've been taking space out of my week to focus on like soft workouts and focus on exercises, and techniques that rejuvenate my body and bring energy back into me, because I'm just in this season where my focus is so intensely elsewhere. And that has been a very humbling experience, but a very valuable experience to me as well, because this is my curiosity. This is my opportunity to say, all right, well, this is just where I need to be right now, and I need to be okay and honest about that. So it's been cool.
You see, like I think that's important though. I do find that as someone who definitely comes from like, being a business owner and like having to like be on all the time, and how difficult it must be to finally like find that moment to be like, I need to slow down and, like you said, do these soft workouts. Mm-hmm. Is this something that's become easier with time, or like is it still like you said, there's a part of you that's like, I should be doing these weights, or like I should be trimming down and stuff like that?
I think there's still a small part of me that feels that way occasionally, but I will say it has definitely gotten easier over time. And in part, I think that's because I feel the benefits of listening to my body. I feel the benefits of trusting my intuition. And what I mean by that is I feel better after doing these like softer workouts where I'm just maybe focusing on very small movement, on recovery, on breath. To give you actually a really visceral example, that's been kind of my focus and how I've been trying to treat my workouts and my exercise time for the last couple of months. This past weekend, I went indoor rock climbing, and it did not go very well. And I don't know if you've ever been indoor rock climbing, but it is a very intense, very like strength challenging experience. And it was a lot of fun because I was doing it with some friends and we had people in town. So it was enjoyable in the social aspect of it and even in the activity. But I was exhausted afterwards. I was exhausted for the rest of the day and into the next day. And it was nice because I got to have this experience while I was climbing of like, okay, like I can do this. And it, felt fun. But I also just think that it didn't feel good after the fact in the way that I think a lot of people can, in the way that I think people should experience fitness. I don't think fitness should feel terrible after the fact. You shouldn't feel exhausted for 2 days. I mean, soreness and whatnot is one thing, especially if you're at the beginning of a journey. I'll certainly make that caveat, but I just think that ultimately, to answer your question in short, I think there will maybe always be a small part of me that just wants to push myself in that way. I'm inherently a bit of a competitive person that way, but I think that all in all, it's that voice has been so much quieter because I do just feel good after trusting my intuition and taking the approach that I think is very honest for my body.
Ooh, I
Yeah.
like that ending of it being taking the approach that's more honest with your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
it's like anything, like that season might change, you know. I mean, I expect it will change. There will be seasons where my work isn't as intense and I can focus more on just, you know, lifting heavier things and really pushing myself in that capacity. And it'll be my responsibility to make sure that those priorities are balancing out. You know, first of all, I don't want to be in a place where my work is perpetually intense. But I just recognize that that's 21st century living for a lot of people. There are seasons for everything. And it's my responsibility to identify, okay, like maybe this season has maybe gone on too long, or this season, needs to come to a close and I need to rebalance and reshift my priorities. You know, it's almost like, I feel like this is actually a cool way to think of it, just as the self-love scientist. It's kind of like a relationship. You know, there are different seasons in every relationship, and that doesn't exclude the relationship you have with yourself and with your own life. And I just think that has been one very cool growth experience for me, is this recognition that, first of all, things do not stay stagnant. Your health doesn't stay stagnant. Your life circumstances don't stay stagnant. They're always shifting. But at the end of the day, you're in control. You're in the driver's seat, you know, and you have to figure out where your priorities are and where you're going to be spending your time, and how you're going to be interacting with your own body and your own health. Because it's just like any other relationship that requires that type of attention and focus.
ooh, that was cool. And I do agree. I have found personally, like with the relationship we have with ourselves, not only do your interests change, like with your experiences and as you grow and develop more as a person, but like even down to like the cellular level, like things are happening as as we grow, like as we get older. And that includes like how you're nourishing yourself with food. And then for, not leaning too much on men, but for women, like we're in this constant, cycle with like
Yeah.
where we're like, meet me where my body is.
Yes.
And
Yes.
knowing, what levels and things are looking like.
Yeah.
You're right. Like having this solid relationship with yourself and learning to listen, like truly to all the different
Yeah.
options to what makes you you.
Yeah. And it can be, I completely understand that it can also be overwhelming to do that, especially when you're first starting. I went through that experience as well when I was first undergoing this process of oh my goodness, like I have 70,000 different cues going on in my body. How do I filter out what's actually happening? And how do I filter out if I actually want the chocolate bar or my blood sugar is just low and I should eat something? Like generally, it's not a short-term process. And like we said, it's not a stagnant process, but I think, the just to kind of add on one, if I was to give advice to someone who really wanted to get deeper into that mind-body connection and felt like there could be valuable into learning more about their body, is that there is very little, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just about figuring out what works for you and what genuinely feels good for your body. And, it's interesting to have these conversations because I think some people, hear them. And I have this kind of inherent, maybe fear that, people hear my perspective and approach and it comes off as like, oh, you should never push yourself. You should never challenge yourself. Like you should never try and lift heavy weights or grow. And that's definitely not what I'm trying to go for here. It's not about not pushing yourself or not challenging, but I just think the way I approach challenge, the way I think of a challenge is a little different. I don't necessarily think it's this quantitative thing of, oh, last week I could push 50 pounds over my head. This week I can push 55. And as such, I'm challenging myself. I think my perception of what a challenge is it's this work. It's stepping into yourself and and experiencing something that might be a little internally uncomfortable and maybe not quite as quantitative as we've made the fitness world, but in my opinion, exceptionally more valuable because you're just learning about the uniqueness that is you, for lack of better terms. And that's information that you can take with you for the rest of your life. And so I think my big kind of, if I was to offer a suggestion, is that to not fear whether something is going to be right or wrong, but just really try and kind of tap in and listen to how your body's response is to it. And if you do the soft workout and it feels amazing and you spend 2 months just focusing on breath work and stretching and pull back from this high level of intensity that you were at, and that feels amazing to you, don't feel guilt around that, And if that's what you've been doing for 2 months and you're kind of like, man, should I be upping my intensity? Should I be trying to focus on a different season? Just give it a shot, and your body's going to let you know if it was the right move or not. You just have to listen for it.
I like that. And it sounds to me like it's pretty important to develop this relationship, this almost like trust with what your body is saying, which when you were speaking, I was thinking about that quote where it's like the body doesn't lie, or like the body keeps the score.
Yeah.
An excellent read, by the way, everybody. If you haven't read that book yet, it's a deep read. Aside from that though, like, what are your thoughts on the fact that your body doesn't lie, regardless of like what we might be thinking? And I would say, to add to that, it's for those who, we're in a very high intense, like social media driven society at this time. So a lot of folks may be driven to go to the gym or go to fitness centers because they see like the 6-pack or they see the power couples. And so they'll put themselves in these situations where like they think that's what they want, but then they experience like pain, fatigue, mental exhaustion.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think it all goes back to that starting like foundational mentality of your body is just so much more than a conglomeration of muscles, bone, and fat. It's just so much more. There's so much more there. And I love how you said when you're speaking and you said developing that trust with your body. I think that's a really beautiful way to put it, because I think that's lacking a lot recently, especially in kind of just this new, and this is a slightly broader context, but just in the healthcare system now as well. I think people rely very, very heavily on, healthcare providers. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the health industry. Doctors, physical therapists, surgeons, all very, very valuable people in society. But I think, especially with the era of like Googling it, people are not, once again, kind of not trained to listen and trust in their own intuition about their body, because they can just get on Google and Google can tell them what's wrong. And Google may or may not, might be right. I don't know, but so I just think that I think the same goes for people trying to enter this era of fitness, or like you said, kind of the fit couple goals or whatever it is, just for the aesthetics portion of it. And I can recognize the value of aesthetics as well. You want to feel comfortable in your body, but I think you made a really solid point of asking, is that actually what you want? Is that actually what's going to make you comfortable in your body? And letting your body and kind of intuition provide you with a very honest answer, and digging into that a little deeper. I think a lot of people would probably say no, because first of all, it takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of discipline to achieve that type of body, the 6-pack, the very streamlined physique. And for people who can do it for sport or just because that's their desire, it's actually, it's really amazing. It's not an easy thing to do. So that's not to knock it. It's more just, I think, from the perspective that you were saying of, is this actually what you want? Just sitting down and asking that question is a very valuable practice. And you might be surprised by the answer you get. Your body might go, well, not really, but is it that you want something else that you think that that physique is going to achieve for you? And I think that could be a very valuable follow-up question.
Ooh, I like that. Yes. Yeah. Like by doing this workout, like what I think it's like about defining those intentions.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
Yes, intentions. I love that.
Oh my gosh. And then I like the way you use the word comfortable, because I think nowadays, instead of people saying like, I want to choose what's comfortable, they want to, I feel like comfortable and confident might be two different words. What are your thoughts on?
Comfortable and confident being two different words. I do agree. I think that that's an interesting one to think about, actually. Yeah, I mean, I do think that comfortable can just mean a lot of different things, and I think, confidence can as well. And I think those two things go very, very hand in hand, but comfortability is going to feel very different just depending on the person. I feel like I always go back to that concept of individualization, and it makes it challenging because when you have to look at every single person as a very unique individual, well, suddenly you have 6 billion plus people to look at as an individual. But comfortable for you is going to look, again, very different than comfortable for me. And that said, confidence might look the same for both of us. Confidence is just kind of that air of contentedness in yourself that you can exude or portray. Comfortability, I might have to think more about that. I might have to think more about that question. What are your thoughts on that one? I'm curious.
But comfortable versus confident?
Yeah.
I feel like the way you were using it, like I'm comfortable sounds like that connection to trust, like, oh, I'm comfortable with the amount of work I'm going to put my body through today,
Yeah. Yeah.
And with over time, with continuing this relationship and like checking in with yourself, like you said, like going, do I really want to go to the what is it called? The CrossFit class, or do I really want to do yoga? And being like comfortable slash, like I would say even like content with your decision
Yeah.
to go through with that. And I find that as you begin to like enjoy, like you said, like you go, like let's say whichever one you end up picking, and then you come home and you feel energized, or you're like, I feel accomplished, I feel good. And that's something that builds your confidence, like not just in the way you might be showing up, but in more of an emotional and mental.
Yeah. I feel like that what they both do is the more you, sorry, hello. The more that I might have to think more about this phrase. What I'm trying to think of is the more you make decisions that you are truly comfortable with and that genuinely speak to you, the more confident you will have in the ability to make those decisions. But I also think that maybe that's not quite right, to be honest. I'm back talking myself because totally back talking myself, because it's not just about choosing what always makes you feel comfortable. And this is what I was talking about earlier. This is where I think I get that inherent fear where I come off as like, again, never challenge yourself, never push yourself, because you do, like, in order to grow, you have to make decisions that are going to put you in uncomfortable spaces, because that's really where growth happens. And so I think I might backtalk myself. It's not just about making decisions that make you comfortable. I think it's just getting confident in making decisions and being comfortable with making decisions and recognizing it might be the right decision, it might be the wrong decision, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. It's just you made the decision, and then you can glean the information after the fact and kind of be confident that you have the ability to figure it out as you go along. I'm not sure if I explained that one well. But...
No, it's good. And I see exactly where you're coming from, because I'm the same way. Like truly as human beings, like the only way we do grow is to, get out of your comfort zone. Like, oh, you want to, like, whether or not it's taking a new class or seeking like one-to-one instruction,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to put myself in a position and go against what's, what was my normal for so long, and now begin this new experience, which,
Yeah.
can be uncomfortable for a moment. And then
Yeah.
over time, like with that exposure, with the experiences, then you start to build that
Yeah.
confidence.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I mean, this conversation, I think, just goes back a lot to what we were talking about with the relationship that you develop with yourself. And on a personal level, I mentioned being this just kind of year with all this growth in the business and really developing the studio and the methodology and building the team. Like I said, it's been a pretty high intensity professional experience for me right now. And that's just been taking a lot of my just energy. And as such, I haven't had as much energy to focus on my physical wellness and my growth in that space. I've just been intentionally choosing that my physical exercise space is going to be in a softer era and much of my energy is going into the professional space. Interestingly enough, and this literally again just happened to me this weekend, and the rock climbing experience was one of the big catalysts for me because small side story, I used to really enjoy rock climbing for like a year and I got very good at it and really strong. It was very exciting for me, but but then, I haven't really done it for a year. So of course, first of all, I recognize I'm not going to go back into it and be like amazing, but it was very humbling for me to have the experience of not feeling very strong and feeling so fatigued for the next couple of days. And so for me, that was kind of a catalytic moment of recognizing, okay, I feel like I have crossed a boundary, and I feel like my professional experience, I've officially kind of tipped a scale that I don't want to have tipped. I don't want to dedicate so much of my energy and so much of just my mental and physical space to my professional at the expense of my physical health. Because at the end of the day, health is your wealth. So if you don't have your health, then nothing else matters. And so for me to have this experience of feeling so fatigued for a couple of days after this, relatively high intensity workout, we were climbing for like an hour and a half. It was something that was a catalytic moment for me where, again, I had to be very honest with myself, and I sat down and had a little internal Eva conversation this weekend and said, is this balance that I have in my life right now really benefiting me? Is it what I want in the long term? And the answer was no. The answer was no. And so now it's my responsibility to figure out, how am I going to make those changes? What am I going to change in my professional setting right now to ensure that I'm not letting that one kind of module in my life eat up all of my energy physically and mentally? I want to make sure that I have energy left over to focus on improving my health. I want to make sure that that sphere is also something that brings energy and vitality into my own health. I want to be able to focus on my relationship, with my husband as well as with my friends. And there was a season for me to be very focused on my work, but I'm happy that now I've identified that this season is over. And it's not that I won't focus on my work. I will still focus on my work, but I am going to be finding ways to create more balance. And it's up to me to figure out how I'm going to do that.
Wow, that was beautiful. And I love that you're able to recognize that now that, I mean, you said something very powerful. Like if you don't have your health, like you don't have wealth. Like wealth really is more than just money. It's your entire being. And you definitely answered like this other question I have is, I would like to know, for anyone who is wanting to, like, how do you overcome the talk when it comes to people who, like, even myself, like I love to move my body. And then also there might come a point where I have so much going on. And at the same time, I might be struggling with a little bit of guilt or sabotage. It's like, well, I definitely should be moving, otherwise like I'm considering myself lazy or like still not worthy. How do you, recommend to other people, or you yourself, how do you overcome those like I want to say like, in a sense, like negative self-talks to get us to that point where we are comfortable with even doing nothing
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
a stretch.
Yeah, honestly, that's one that I still kind of work through as well. I appreciate your transparency in saying that, like, how do I, even in your own practice, like when you have so much going on, like the recognition that that nagging voice in your brain is like, oh, well, you're just being lazy. And again, I think a lot of that comes back to having an internal process to sorting out like where your energy levels are for that day, and doing something of a regular check-in. This is honestly just from a very practical application standpoint, this is something that I do pretty regularly. And my caveat with just the story that I just gave you is I got out of the habit of doing this practice regularly, and I think that's why I got into such an intense kind of work season. But the practice that I employ is literally just finding a space, usually in my house, because my house is my happy place. I love my apartment. So I find a space where I feel really comfortable and can just have some peace and quiet. And I literally just do like an internal check-in. And I know, like, people talk a lot about internal dialogue. That's basically what I do with myself. And I might spend 5 or 10 or 15 minutes just kind of sitting there and thinking through the experience of what I've been doing up until this point, taking a really honest assessment of how is that making me feel? And based on those two factors, what am I going to do moving forward to ensure that I'm continuing to feel well? Because the most valuable thing for me is that my body, my mind, my mental health and emotions continue to feel well. And that doesn't necessarily always mean happy, but because happiness is a slightly different thing, but just knowing that I am taking steps to take care of myself. And like I said, in full transparency, got out of the practice of doing that. It used to be something that I would do like every week, just kind of over the weekend when I had that apartment to myself, and just would kind of sit down and be like, so what's going on? What's going on with me? And I haven't done that for a couple of months, and I just did it last night, actually, for the first time in months. So it's really fortuitous timing for this conversation. And my body had this very kind of just like very almost vulnerable reaction of saying, you have been pushing yourself way too hard in the workspace, and mentally and physically we can't keep up right now, and we have to rework some things. And so I got to kind of work through mentally and be like, all right, well, what is that going to look like, and how can I take care of myself to help rebalance these scales so I feel well and I feel better than really the kind of like energetic exhaustion that I've been feeling.
Oh, that was great. Everyone listening, go back like 3 to 5 minutes or even start over. Activity about checking in. I find like I would call it like doing inventory on yourself daily.
Yeah, I love that.
And even at the end of the day, like, and not being so hard on yourself, like, hey, I did this and I learned this. So, what's the takeaway? Like, what are the positive incomes and applications I can use tomorrow? So,
Yeah, yeah. And I think just to like close out that thought, because, after explaining all of that, I think one thing that I've learned over time is, I'm always learning it, but just to your point about like negative self-talk, at the end of the day, it's just like there's no room for negative self-talk in your life. I think just coming back to that and remembering like it's not helpful. It's like I'm always kind of this mindset where it's like, if you can learn something from any experience you've had, positive or negative, if you can walk away having learned something about yourself, having learned something you can take into whatever is your next step, even if, like, for me, these past few months, it was certainly not a negative experience because I accomplished a lot professionally that I'm very happy with. But this experience of the last few months has taught me, hey, we got to make sure we're balancing out those scales a little bit. And so there's no point in me kind of sitting here thinking, oh, like I really shouldn't have done that. Like I shouldn't have spent all that time on my work and sacrificed so much and whatever. It's like, because first of all, that's just not helpful. It's going to make me feel crappy. And it's just reinforcing more negativity into my life. So you can just kind of put the mute button on that noise and instead focus on what have you been doing up until this point? How is it making you feel? And then what can you shift or adjust moving forward to help rebalance your wellness and your scales? Like you said, that inventory, then I think, that's just a really, really easy, cost effective and internal practice to employ with regular, kind of regular intervals.
Amazing. And everyone listening, yeah, try this, self check-in with yourself, even when it's as something as simple as, how do I want to feel today? And then at the end of the day, recheck in with yourself. Did I do the things? And try not to give yourself too hard of a time. And also don't be so hard on yourself. Like
Yeah.
you've got plenty of time coming for you, and you can always try again tomorrow. So before I let you go, Eva, I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I would love, like, if you would love to share what's coming next for you in terms of like you and your business.
Ooh, yeah, a big question. So up until this point, this past year has really just been focused on getting us settled into our new beautiful studio space. We moved out of my home practice and moved into a commercial studio space, which has been amazing, focusing on building the team. And building team growth is going to continue to be a big focus for the next year for sure. I feel extremely lucky to, up until this point, just have a great group of instructors and practitioners who have joined me along this journey. So we're going to continue to build our team out in that way. Slightly longer term, we'll open up a couple of more studios, but we're still probably looking about 2 years out. So for now, we're just going to keep growing the space that we have and growing the community we've built.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your insights on how we can create this like loving relationship with your body by learning to trust and listen and moving at a pace that is, like, as you would say, comfortable. And I really do appreciate the way you use that word today. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. This was so much fun. I loved the conversation.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to another amazing episode of Love and Lattes. This is Victoria and Eva signing off, and we'll see you in the next episode.